So you're seeing us first thing in the morning. We haven't had a chance to clean up yet. Every single day, all of the farm animal exhibits are completely cleaned. They're given fresh bedding if anything is soiled or wet. But right here in the morning, you can see how much manure cows can produce just in an evening, and here and in the other stall as well. It's one of the reasons they're such efficient animals, and one of the reasons we use them in agriculture is that they can take huge volumes of coarse food. You'll notice there's no hay left in here. We can't digest hay and produce any usable energy out of it, but cattle can. And so they eat large volumes of low nutrition food, process it, and then produce for us all kinds of great products. I originally got my start in animals and education with an organization called Heifer International, which has got operations around the world. They provide livestock and education to people to help reduce poverty and increase sustainability throughout the world. Their goal is ending world hunger while caring for the earth. And we used to talk about some of the 7 M's that you can get from animals and agriculture. Specifically, cattle, sheep, and goats are the most commonly known for these. And cattle are great in part because they can take those low palatability, so not very tasty, not very nutritious foods, and convert them into really useful things. So the first 2 M's are pretty well known, and actually we've got some great signage on the front of the exhibit here about the 2 different kinds of cattle types that you usually see. I'm from back east, and we have a lot of dairy cows. Here in the Midwest, I see a lot more beef cattle. And so the 2 M's associated with that are milk and meat. So cattle are raised for those primary purposes. Dairy cows, a production dairy cow, can produce up to 100 pounds of milk a day at her peak lactation, which is a huge volume of milk. Beef cattle are great at growing over just a few years to produce lots of big, meaty muscles. You'll notice that Charlotte is pretty lean looking. We do have people sometimes comment, is your cow okay? She's fine, she's a dairy cow. And so we've had many generations of people picking the cows that produce the most milk. And to produce lots of milk, you need a great big belly to eat lots of food. And you need big wide hips so you can have lots of babies, because you do not produce milk until you've had a calf. And then every year or so they have to have another calf to keep producing milk. But you don't need a lot of extra muscle or padding or fat, because every bite of food you eat that helps to sustain your big muscles or your squishy fat is energy that's not being used to produce milk. So over many generations of picking cows that produce lots of milk, you end up with cows that have big bones, but very little padding. And so what you're seeing is really just the structure of the cow. She's in great flesh. She's a little scruffy right now, 1, because she's grooming herself. But 2, in the winter, she just gets a little bit fluffy and all over the place. But if you've come in the summer, you see she is sleek and shiny. She's in great condition. You're just really seeing the underlying structure in a way that you don't see with beef cattle if you're driving down the interstate in North Dakota and Minnesota. And Linda is a great example of an intermediate. So she is a dual-purpose breed. She's a miniature, she's not a baby, but the Irish Dexters are used both for milk and meat. They're not the best meat producers. They take longer to get to a full size for slaughter, or if that was their destination. They don't produce as much milk per animal, even scaled down, just not as productive as a production dairy cow. So she has a little bit more padding over her body. You can see a little bit of the hips there still, but she's got bigger through the shoulders, she's got a little more through the bum, nice flat back. You're not seeing so much of the spinal process. So she's sort of an intermediate, and I think a lot of us can visualize a big beef cow. There's all over the grocery stores, there's pictures of beef cattle. And they tend to be just round or flat, lots of squares and circles on them. Oh, is that so? So those were our first 2 M's, were meat and milk. Another one, which we kind of talked about, is right around here, is manure. You don't usually think about manure as being a productive resource, but when cattle eat those rough grasses or silage, which is basically like sauerkraut made from corn stalks, things that we can't digest, they digest it, they get all the good nutrition out of it, and they produce this manure. I had mentioned that we collect all of our manure, we put it in a big compost pile. Now that compost then can be used to fertilize our gardens, and it has been. We've actually used compost here to fertilize the garden out there where we grew corn last year and soy. It's a way of cycling nutrition. So if you have one area of the farm that's really productive and grows a lot of grass and clover, or you can grow corn, you can take some of that nutrition, put it in the cows, and then what they excrete, you can put in areas. Maybe you have an area of the farm that got overgrown. It's one that you planted crops on it too many times and it started to lose nutrition. You can literally move the nutrition from the productive area through the cow, get some meat or milk out of the cow, and then take the manure and put it somewhere else. So you're cycling all of that nutrition through your whole farm. It's really effective, and small farms are really great at doing this. You do run into a little bit of trouble, though, if you have all of your nutrition in one place. So if you're growing corn in one country or one state, if you have cows in another state, and you have the places that need nutrition in another. And so that's one of the big endeavors of our country now, is figuring out how to successfully move that nutrition through larger operations and across the country in a way that is beneficial both to people and the environment and produces healthy food for our animals. And that is something that's a challenge, and it is something that people are working on doing better every day.
And it's something that we also talk about during our Agriculture Adventure Day.
It is.
In early June, which will happen again this summer.
Yes. Please come to Agriculture Adventure Day. It was amazing. We had so many great organizations come. I got to talk to the Soy Council and the Corn Council and people who were selling seed for all different types of products and conservation and soil maintenance. It was amazing. Okay. So we have 3 M's now: milk, meat, manure. One thing that we haven't really talked about is something that I'm actually wearing on my feet. I've got some leather boots on right now. I'm not wearing any right now, but I have a couple of hair picks that are made out of horn. So materials, raw materials can be obtained from animals like cattle, sheep, even horses. If you think about old chairs, they used to be stuffed with horsehair, which is just acquired by grooming your horse every year when they shed. Other materials like wool, we have fluffy sheep. So all of these materials, again, animals that are eating products that we wouldn't be able to eat: grass and clover, and living out in the pasture in rough areas, and converting it into usable materials. Really, almost all parts of the animal can be used in different ways, and there's all kinds of great old stories about how people utilize different products. If you're ever interested in the way people used to utilize everything, I mean, out here we talk about using all parts of the bison is a Native American adage. It's something that if these are animals that you are raising for yourself, you want to use as much of them as you can. So milk, meat, materials, manure. One that we don't use here very much, but we could potentially in the future, or places that I've worked in the past have used the muscles from the animal as draft power. I trained a team of oxen when I was working and living in the University of Massachusetts. And so oxen are cattle that are trained to do work. And so cattle specifically are known for their great muscles and plowing. Horses are very commonly used as draft animals and riding animals, but even smaller muscle. In South America, llamas and alpacas are used as draft animals. In northern India and China, you have yaks, or in Southeast Asia, water buffalo. There are all kinds of really cool animals that are used for their power. So we have milk, meat, material, manure, and muscle, and then 2 more for our last 7 M's. One thing that you can do with animals, we have 2 females in here, so it's not going to happen, but our zoo is known for our amazing reproduction of some really endangered species. So animals can make more. If you are using animals in agriculture, if you have an animal, for example, if you had an older cow, she's going to have had a lot of babies, and you maybe could have kept some of those babies to be future replacement stock. With your sheep, if you come in the spring, we usually have a crop of lambs that are super cute. So more is a thing that you can get from animals. That's an M. And the last one, which is not one that we use here at the Red River Zoo, but because we're talking about animals and agriculture, is money. All of these amazing products, even the manure, has a value, and you can sell it. So we have 7 different M's, not counting moo, that we can get from cattle, sheep, goats, and a lot of the other animals that we have here at the Red River Zoo.